Okay, so here we are at number 7. Test the claim about the population mean at the level of significance. Assume that the population is normally distributed. If convenient, and it will be, we are going to use technology. So remember we had that formula, z equals, I should just show you right quick. This formula, we can do all of this with just this, but we're going to use technology because we can now. So this is our information. Here's our claim, and our claim, just to note, is the null hypothesis. And what we're going to do right now is figure this stuff out. So let's go on our calculators, hit stat, if you would please. And then hit arrow, because we're going to be testing now, not calculating. And then number 1, because this is a z-test. And we're going to put in some information. So the first thing they're asking me for is the population mean. That's given as 22,500. The next thing is the standard deviation, which is 1,200. What's the sample mean? Well, the sample mean is 23,500. How many people were in this sample, or subjects, this many? Now, here's what I want you to notice. I have 3 choices, not equal to, less than, or greater than. My information, however, is in less than or equal to. Not an option here. It's because for your calculator, you're not going to be using the null hypothesis. You'll be using the alternative always. So what's the alternative to this would be greater than. So let's go for that. Also, note, this is like because this would be a right-tailed test. So let's calculate some things. Wonderful. What do we have? Well, before that, probably should have showed you this. My alpha is 0.01, and based upon this right here, I know that it's a right-tailed test. So 0.01, then you're going to look in your chart, which is here. 0.01 right-tailed test, again, is 2.33. And so what's the z-score that's given here? Well, for here, my z-score for all this information is 5.59, which is way out here. Super rejected. So based upon this, we will reject. Remember, we're always going to reject the shade. And let's start making sentences now. So reject, which was the claim. H naught was the claim. The null hypothesis was the claim, excuse me. At a, so move this decimal point over twice, at a 1% level of significance. Okay. All right, there you go. So now let's do some word problems. If you could, please take a moment. If you'd like to, you can press pause. But I'd like for you to read this next sentence and either underline what's important or highlight it if you have a highlighter. So sprinkler system manufacturers designed average temperature of at least 135. That right there is telling me that they're saying that it's greater than or equal to 135. Splendid. A sample of 32, so this is n equals 32, was conducted, and they found that the actual sample mean, so remember sample mean is your x bar, so I'm going to write that over here just to have a spot. X bar is 133. So they claimed that the population is 135. It was 133. Assume the standard deviation is, so this is your sigma, is 3.3. At an alpha, look, we get a lot from just this sentence. The level of significance alpha is 0.1. So looking at this telling me that it's 0.1. I know that this should be, for mean, this would be less than 135. So this is a left-tailed test. And what is this left-tailed for? Well, we'll look that up in a moment. Let's get to the A, B, C, and D part of this. So identify the claim and the ha. Well, because it has an equal to sign, this is the null hypothesis. The mean is greater than or equal to 135, which would mean this would be less than 135. This is what they're claiming, so I'm going to label that as the claim. And then they would like for me to find the z-score. What is the z? Why is this important? Because eventually, down at step D, I'm going to figure out if I'm going to reject it or not. So it was a left-tailed test, and the alpha was 0.1. So just to do that real quick, left-tailed 0.1. What's your value for z-score? Negative 1.28. That's my rejection region. I know I skipped around, but I would like to have that in my head. So I'm going to use technology the same way that we just did, instead of using the equation for z equals whatnot. So go ahead and hit stat one more time. Go all the way to the right to test. You can probably hit left once instead. And then you're going to enter in all of your data one more time. Okay, so this is me in my calculator. The mean 135, standard deviation 3.3, sample mean was 133, my n was 32, and I'm hitting it to the left because this is based upon it being the alternative hypothesis being less than. And then we'll calculate, and we find two things. Number one, my z-score is negative 3.42. The p-value is, now look at this please, it's 3.03 blah blah blah, e negative 4. Remember that e negative 4? Well, let's write this, 3.036. That's scientific notation, so it's saying times 10 to the negative 4. Negative 4 means you move it over 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is a very, very, very small p-value. It's 0.00036, just because I didn't round right. So that's your p-value using technology, which is nice and convenient. This is my rejection area, and so with the z-score of negative 3.42, this is like out here. Super reject. So we will now reject the null hypothesis. So what can we say about these things? Well, I'm going to write a sentence and then I'll read it to you, so I don't have to spend the time writing it on. Okay, so there is enough evidence at a 10% level of significance to reject the claim. Okay, I'm going to now let you do sum number 9 kind of by yourself. Identify everything you need to identify as we did for number 7, but then also mostly for number 8. And then go ahead and press pause on here because I'm only going to go over the answer and see how you do. Okay, well hopefully you actually pause and try this by yourself because I'm just going to go over the highlights here. My n was 64, my sample mean was 905, the population standard deviation was 125. Their claim was that it was, the mean was greater than 874. That's their claim. That is not the null hypothesis. It's the alternative hypothesis. That's kind of just to be aware of, which means this is a right-tailed test. The null hypothesis is less than or equal to 875. So you enter in all your information, and what was the level of significance? It was 0.05 for a right-tailed test. That tells me that the z should be 1.645. So everything over here would be a reject for the null hypothesis. And my z-score, when you entered it into your calculator, was 1.98, which means I should reject this. This is what we are rejecting. So if we are rejecting the null hypothesis, then we're supporting the alternative. If we reject the null, that means we have to support the other one, which would be this one. So there is enough evidence at a 5% level of significance to support the claim, which would have been this hypothesis instead. So just kind of note that. If we're rejecting the null, we are supporting the alternative. All right, that's it for me. Thank you so much for joining me, and you may now begin your homework.